Well, we're here today with two partners now at CCJ, Kim Hall and Bob Gorman. We're faced with some interesting times here within the community, talking about the COVID-19 and kind of where businesses are at. There's a lot of fluidity to the situation happening here on a daily basis, really. And wanted to bring these two, who are a resource for us, just to have some general dialogue as to what businesses should be thinking about, maybe some of the questions you're hearing within your operation, really just to be a resource to you as members and in businesses as to how to deal with this situation. So generally, Kim and Bob, thank you for being here. First off, we appreciate it. So what are you hearing from your clients?
Justin, I'd say the first thing we're hearing is, how do I keep my business safe?
Yeah.
How do I keep my employees safe? This is uncharted territory, as we all know, and people are getting conflicting or different messages from various levels of government, various interest groups, and the news changes by the hour, if not by the day. So they want to be sure that they're safe, and most people, I think, want to err on the side of caution, and so they want to protect their employees. They want to think about the continuation of their business operations. And so that's the big picture. Then they come to us with a number of just individual questions. And we really follow the guidelines put forth by the Centers for Disease Control on the federal level, the Ohio Department of Health. And certainly they're counseling people and businesses to send people home when they're sick, when they're showing signs of the COVID-19, which are essentially a temperature, a cough, and a shortness of breath. Send people home. Try to be more flexible in your PTO or your sick time policies. Don't do anything that will encourage this sickness to come into the workplace, because that's going to have long-run, very bad effects. What would you say, Kim?
Right, just to add on to what Bob was saying, this is a once-in-a-generation event, so it's entirely appropriate to modify your policies to adapt to this event. Making a change to your PTO policy, if it's conveyed to employees that it's temporary, does not necessarily set a precedent and require you to provide that same policy when the emergency is no longer present here with the coronavirus epidemic. So you can make temporary modifications to your policies now, and so long as you communicate it to employees that it is in fact temporary, you don't have to bind yourself to forever to the change in the policy.
It is, you're right, it's uncharted territory. We've had a couple of questions come into the chamber. We try to give as much resources as we can, but we had a couple of specific questions. Maybe you could help us out on those. But one member asked, so if an employee comes to them and says, hey, I really want to work from home, I'm not feeling comfortable with just the environment I'm in, is that a requirement from the employer, or what are your suggestions on that?
Is not a requirement unless the employee has an underlying disability that would make them more susceptible to a worst case scenario if they contracted the coronavirus.
Okay.
In that case, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, you'd have to provide, unless it's an undue hardship, you'd have to provide work from home as a reasonable accommodation under the Act. But we really do encourage people to kind of think outside the box and have people work from home when possible. The CDC, the state, and also the White House are now saying, whenever possible, have your employees work from home. Not always possible, but when it is, it's for many employers an unusual step with its own set of challenges related to computer security and data protection and supervision and so forth. But again, these are unusual times, so it's something that we encourage people to think about whenever it is possible.
And to add on to what Bob was saying, we want to encourage employees to be able to work from home when at all possible, but sometimes it's not possible for some or all employees to work from home. So it might be a good idea for employers to think now whether they want to designate certain employees as mandatory employees or essential employees who will be required to come to work to carry on the essential business operations. So even though we're not at a point where all the businesses are shut down outside of grocery stores or pharmacies, it's a good time to think about and be proactive about designating employees as mandatory employees or essential employees in the event that restrictions get tighter and more businesses shut down or more employees are unavailable to work.
It's interesting. One thing that we've dealt with as a community, as a chamber, is right before this situation came on, lowest unemployment rate in 30 plus years, production at one of its highest peaks. So there's pressure on businesses, even though we're going through this, to produce, right?
Absolutely.
So a couple of questions is, a lot of employees buy into that and they want to be supportive of the company. So there are employees that we've heard they're not feeling well, but they're still coming to work, right? So as an employer, can I require somebody to go home if I think that they are not feeling well? Can I take their temperature? What are kind of the steps for me to protect my workforce, making sure that people aren't showing up?
Very good questions.
Okay.
A week ago, I was telling employers that the standard advice, which is you can't take your employee's temperature. That is a test, that is a medical test under the Americans with Disabilities Act. But the rules have at least arguably changed since the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. That the regulations, some of the federal regulations link to declarations of pandemic, and even though taking temperature is a medical test, still a medical test can be administered under certain conditions if it is job related and consistent with business necessity, and not doing it could put a person in a position where they're posing what the law calls a direct threat on other employees. And because temperature is linked with coronavirus, our advice now is we're not saying you're absolutely in the clear to do that, but if you do it in a way where it's done privately, it's done confidentially, and it's done consistently among your workforce, I think the risk of being on the wrong side of the law during this pandemic period is remote.
Interesting.
And to answer your question about whether you can send an employee home if the employee isn't feeling well, you absolutely can and should do that. So even if an employee hasn't been confirmed with a positive test for coronavirus, if the individual is exhibiting symptoms of coronavirus, in order to protect the health and safety of coworkers and prevent the spread of the virus, you should send that employee home. And if the employee tests positive for coronavirus later on, you will want to identify who that employee came into close contact with, so you could send those potentially exposed coworkers home as well. However, you will want to keep in mind that when you're going through this process, if somebody has been diagnosed with coronavirus, you are required to maintain confidentiality, so you cannot release their names to coworkers.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope, and
It is a
it's kind
slippery
of a tricky situation. So there are employees that were not feeling well on the beginning of this onset. So let's say they are getting ready to come back to work. Okay, it may not have anything to do with the coronavirus, but as an employer, can I require them to give me some kind of doctor verification that, that they are fit to essentially be back to work, if that makes sense?
So you are able to require a doctor's note when somebody is returning to work after they've been out sick. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that the healthcare system is overwhelmed right now. So requiring doctor's notes from every employee who is off due to a cold or some other illness might not necessarily be the best idea now. However, if you do have a policy requiring individuals to have doctor's notes, it is something you can enforce. But in the interest of not overwhelming the healthcare system and keeping into consideration the fact that doctors are very busy right now and have other matters to attend to, you might want to consider allowing an alternative to a doctor's note, like a stamp or an email from a physician, in order to satisfy that requirement.
Okay. And what about workers' comp? I mean, is the coronavirus, is that ever going to be considered a workers' comp claim? We've had those questions, and maybe a two-part. And have you been dealing with people trying to seek unemployment through the pandemic, those businesses that are being directly affected, and specifically talking about a restaurant or a bar situation where now their employees literally can't go to work?
As for the workers' compensation part of this question, workers' compensation is a possibility here, although those claims should be approached with caution because the burden in establishing what's called an occupational disease, which coronavirus would fall under that potentially, the burden for establishing that type of occupational disease claim is pretty high. So it would be difficult for employees, generally speaking, outside of the healthcare or first responder context to establish that they were exposed to coronavirus and they contracted coronavirus during the course of their employment with their employer. Pretty much it's very difficult to pinpoint that you contracted the disease at work as opposed to at the grocery store or at home. So while it's possible that somebody could successfully prevail on a workers' compensation claim related to coronavirus, it is important for employers to approach that with caution and to discuss the matter with legal counsel and decide whether or not they want to contest the claim.
Okay.
Yeah, and on the unemployment
Yeah.
side, Justin, when the governor issued his order closing, restaurants and other similar businesses, they basically greased the skids on unemployment in a couple of different ways. Allowed people to apply right away, waived the normal 1 week waiting period, allowing claims to be fulfilled as quickly as possible. They're not generally not charging them directly against the employer's account, so there's a little less direct impact. It's through a mutual account that the state operates, and so not only for the businesses that have been specifically closed, there's a kind of an expedited process, and the state's also more or less said it's going to employ the same process if you're laid off from even a different type of business, or if your business is forced to shut down as a result of coronavirus.
Now, we have heard that a number of the workers within restaurant and bars and gyms now, right? So they've asked, is there a deadline on when if I'm laid off, is there a deadline in which I need to seek to file for unemployment? There's been discussion, and this will air on Wednesday, that I need to have that done by Sunday. Is there a deadline associated with filing? Are you aware?
I'm not aware of anything that quick. Are you, Kim?
I'm not aware of anything that quick. Obviously, the matter has been evolving minute by minute, so there might be certain restrictions we're not aware of currently, but I'm not aware of any requirement like that. But obviously, employees are urged to apply as soon as possible in order not to prejudice their application for benefits.
Yeah. A couple of small businesses have also reached out to us and said, hey, we don't have the best handbook. We don't have the best policies for our employees and right now it's sick leave. So any suggestions on, if I'm a small business that maybe doesn't have the best handbook, should I be worried about getting something in place now? Does it set a negative precedent, moving forward? Any suggestions on policies or procedures?
Well, everybody is where they are right now.
Yeah,
and if they don't have the handbook in place like they maybe wish they did, my advice would be get some at least interim policies in place now for the current real crisis that we have. And as long as it's communicated that this is for the period of time to deal with this crisis, and it's we can revise, amend, or change it at a later time. That's what the advice would be.
Okay.
I just get it done.
Okay. What about resources? There's also tons of information out there. I mean, inundated with every trade association, every organizational group wants to be on top of the COVID-19 information. What do you suggest a business, where do they log in, or where do they get information that you think would be most relevant to them as business owners?
You're right, Justin. There are a lot out there. Our firm has spent a number of hours in the past few weeks putting together a detailed list of frequently asked questions that has been received a number of hits on our website. The CDC has very good coronavirus resources, including guidelines for employers and so forth, that the Department of Health also does. And I think the most challenging thing is what you see today may be different tomorrow.
Correct, yeah.
And really, right now, today, the Senate is taking up a bill that really would change this discussion quite a bit if it passes, because it would provide some significant relief for workers who, for example, are staying home because their kids are off of school. There would be it would be a temporary period, I think, through the end of this year, but there would be up to 2 weeks of sick leave that could be used for their own illness, to take care of the illness of a family member, if they feel they have coronavirus type symptoms, to see a doctor, or to take care of kids who are required to be home. And that slides in ahead of any employer provided sick leave, PTO, anything else. And so it's an additional benefit that would take place. The other thing that's very significant is if this bill passes, it's passed the House and the President's indicated his approval, would be a very significant temporary expansion of the Family Medical Leave Act.
Yeah.
For the first time, it would be a paid benefit at 2/3 pay, up to some limitations, for up to 12 weeks for the same types of situations that I just described. And so now, paid benefit, the way this is handled is the employer will pay that benefit and then receive 100% credit on their next payroll tax filing, their next quarterly payroll tax filing.
Okay.
So, but those are some pretty significant employee-friendly benefits that Congress is close to passing.
And to follow that, it changes the CDC website from just where we're at with the pandemic, right? But then just overall employment, just follow
Absolutely.
that as well.
It has some very good information for employers also.
Okay. Kim, what are you hearing also just on the, when you're reaching out to your clients, or your clients are reaching out to you, what are some of the other main topics that are being discussed?
One concern is they're looking at what's going to happen going forward. We're trying to get our heads around what we're immediately needing to do to address the situation, but we're also looking forward to what possibly might happen. We're looking at states like Pennsylvania who have shut down non-essential businesses, and we're trying to plan for the event of Ohio possibly shutting down non-essential businesses. Until we have an order from the governor or another order from the government stating that non-essential businesses are shut down, we don't necessarily know how that's going to be defined and who that's going to affect. But it's something we want to keep in the back of our minds and possibly plan for going forward in the future. And also, like I mentioned earlier, designating certain employees as mandatory employees or essential employees in the event that restrictions get really tight and businesses have to slim down operations. It's good to think about doing that now and having that planning in place so we don't have to be so reactive in the event that something does happen.
So is there examples maybe of past practice or past situations what do you see as an essential employee or essential business if you talk about the local market?
Sure, that's a good question, and we've never had a shutdown like that before, but we do have some clues based upon what some other states and cities have done in the past few days.
Okay.
And what I've seen at the San Francisco, the greater San Francisco area, shut down all non-essential businesses. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania also just did that. And I will say that they define essential businesses, I would say, fairly broadly. Okay. I mean, not just, grocery stores and pharmacies, but, gas stations. things relating to pets, supply stores that can provide office supplies to work from home.
Oh, really? Okay.
Plumbers, electricians, some skilled people who need if there's something that kind of goes wrong out there. In addition to healthcare and so forth. So we're just going to really have to see what that order says.
But across the board from Pennsylvania to California, have those been fairly consistent though? When you're looking at research-wise?
I'd say the things that I just mentioned are present in the orders that I have seen. Some of them even maybe spread a little bit further than that. California, for example, spends quite a bit of time talking about the fishing industry and those types of things that are more endemic to that area. But it will be interesting to see, and there will certainly, if it does happen in Ohio. Hard to believe we've been talking about this. Last week it was surprising that the NCAA is canceling the tournament. But if it does happen, there probably won't be a lot of notice. My guess is it'll probably be a fairly broad definition of what an essential business is. The other thing is the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has all but said they're not going to go out there and enforce it, building by building.
Almost use common sense.
Yeah. But I mean, certainly, I would advise any employer, if you're subject to this order, to comply with it. Okay. There's a reason it's out there.
Okay. Maybe another question is, so if you're a business and you're just not sure what questions to ask, I think we would be open to questions in this Facebook post as to if you have general questions, but what questions should I ask my legal counsel? Maybe a CCJ is in my legal counsel. What should I be worried about today if I'm a business owner?
I'd be looking at what your obligations are to your customers, your suppliers, your any type of contractual obligations. Your landlords. There's an awful lot of if there are cash flow issues with your business or production flow issues. You have to be aware of that. And I think that we're generally finding most businesses, big and small, are treating this as a crisis, providing some slack, even if they may not contractually be required to. But our advice on a broader scale than just necessarily the employment scale is get in front of those problems, have a conversation. Don't wait until you default on something. Because I think you'll find everything from banks to vendors, suppliers are generally going to be pretty reasonable under the circumstances, but you're better off to try to get in front of it. There will be opportunities in all likelihood for small business administration related loans. They're going to funnel through the state governments, and the details aren't completely flushed out yet, but there will be some opportunities for potentially some capital infusion in that way also. But I think just try to anticipate, what am I supposed to be doing and providing to others in the next 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, and try to get in front of them, plan for contingencies, communicate with the people that you have obligations to.
Yeah, and that's the biggest piece is it could happen tomorrow as far as being essentially forced away from the workplace. So you want to be in a good position. Is there anything else you think that if I'm an audience member, I'm listening to this, is anything else you could offer valuable advice?
I would just go back to our first question that we discussed today is try and be flexible given the situation here. This is not something that's happened before. It might not happen again. So there's no clear-cut way that you're required to go about doing things other than making sure you're complying with applicable law. But you really have a lot of leeway with how employers are addressing this situation. It's not a one-size-fits-all policy. So we would encourage you to be flexible within the bounds of the law, obviously, to try and get your business and your employees through this situation.
And maybe away from the COVID-19, are there any non-COVID-19 coronavirus issues that are a consistent theme throughout discussions with your businesses? Is there anything that's not directly involved with the
Well, I mean, at the moment, this is front and center in everybody's mind. As you said earlier, things have been going gangbusters up until now.
Sure.
And so it was up until recently. It was just the kind of the typical business work, getting the next contract done, the next deal.
Yeah.
This has really knocked everybody back, and as Kim said, it's once in a generation. I think the Ohio Department of Health director says once in every 150-year
Wow.
type of event. And I think some people are frustrated because they don't necessarily see the issue.
Yeah.
My college roommate has a place in northern Italy, and he's been, he's aware, and it's very personal to him. And I heard one of the top people in the World Health Organization say, in a health crisis, if you wait till you know that you're right, it's too late.
Yeah,
it's too late. And so I think that I've done a 180 on this in the last 2 weeks, and I think it's something that does have to be taken very, very seriously. And so I think it has to be front and center on people's minds, and hopefully we'll get back to business as usual in the next month or two.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time today, Kim and Bob. Thank you. I know that you created a document it's been passed around the community, and we'll make sure that it's part of this link as well. It was, I think, 15 questions, general questions that you've outlined, or areas of business.
Yep, we've updated to about 30 now.
Now it's 30?
Updated it today.
Perfect.
So
Yeah,
we'll continue to update it.
So it is a fluid situation.
It really is.
Yeah. So we'll make sure that information is available to you, the most updated document as well. Also, if you have general questions for Kim or for Bob or the whole team at CCJ, if you want to have a general question under this Facebook post, we'll try to get that answered to you. We appreciate your time again, and thank you, folks, and stay safe.